The morning frost painted delicate patterns across the windows of Adelaide Cottage as 6-year-old Prince Louis bounced excitedly in his bedroom, completely oblivious to the December chill that had settled over Windsor. Outside, the world was wrapped in a blanket of white, and the temperature had dropped to an unusually cold -2 degrees Celsius. Yet inside his cozy room, Louis was busy pulling on his favorite pair of bright blue shorts, the ones with tiny dinosaurs printed all over them. "Louis, sweetheart, it's absolutely freezing outside," his nanny, Maria, called from the doorway, holding a pair of warm wool trousers in her hands. "Perhaps these would be more suitable for Christmas morning?" But Louis shook his head firmly, his sandy hair catching the morning light streaming through the frost-covered windows. "No, thank you, Maria. I want to wear my dinosaur shorts today. They're special." Maria sighed softly, knowing better than to argue with the determined young prince. She had learned over the years that Louis, much like his father Prince William at that age, possessed a stubborn streak that was both endearing and, occasionally, challenging. The little boy had inherited not just his father's mischievous smile but also his strong-willed nature. In the kitchen below, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was busy preparing Christmas breakfast when she heard the familiar sound of Louis's footsteps thundering down the oak staircase. She turned, expecting to see her youngest son bundled up warmly for the cold December morning, but instead found herself face to face with a grinning 6-year-old wearing nothing but his pajama top, the dinosaur shorts, and mismatched socks. "Good morning, Mama," Louis chirped, climbing onto his favorite chair at the breakfast table. "Merry Christmas." Catherine couldn't help but smile at her son's enthusiasm, even as she noticed the goosebumps already forming on his bare legs. "Merry Christmas, my darling." "But, Louis, aren't you a bit cold in those shorts? It's quite chilly today." "I'm not cold at all," Louis declared, though his slightly chattering teeth suggested otherwise. "Besides, Santa might be wearing shorts too. It must be very hot at the North Pole with all those ovens making toys." Prince William appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his warm Christmas jumper, and raised an eyebrow at his youngest son's choice of attire. "Santa actually lives where it's very cold, Louis. That's why he wears that big red coat." "Maybe he takes it off when he's working," Louis replied matter-of-factly, swinging his legs under the table. "I bet he gets very hot climbing down all those chimneys." The family's morning routine continued with Princess Charlotte, now 9 years old, joining them at the breakfast table. She took one look at her younger brother and shook her head in the way only an older sister could. "Louis, you're going to freeze," she said, buttering her toast with the precision she had learned from watching her mother. "Remember last week when you insisted on wearing your swimming trunks to the park? You were shivering within 10 minutes." Prince George, at 11, was developing the diplomatic skills that would serve him well in his future role. "Maybe Louis knows something we don't," he said with a wink toward his parents. "Perhaps he's practicing to be a polar bear." "I'm not a polar bear," Louis giggled. "I'm a dinosaur today. That's why I need my dinosaur shorts." As the family gathered around the Christmas tree in the drawing room, the contrast between Louis's summer attire and everyone else's cozy winter clothes became even more apparent. The staff members who had gathered to exchange Christmas greetings couldn't help but notice the young prince's unusual choice, though they were far too polite to comment directly. Mrs. Thompson, the head housekeeper who had worked for the royal family for over 2 decades, whispered quietly to Maria, "Should we perhaps encourage His Royal Highness to add some layers?" Maria smiled knowingly. "I've tried, Mrs. Thompson. But, you know how Master Louis can be when he's set his mind on something." The morning gift exchange began, and Louis's excitement reached new heights as he tore through wrapping paper with the enthusiasm only a 6-year-old could muster. His bare legs were now noticeably red from the cold, but his determination to remain in his chosen outfit never wavered. "Look, Papa," he exclaimed, holding up a new toy helicopter. "Now I can be a rescue pilot and save dinosaurs." William knelt down beside his son, noticing how cold his little legs had become. "That's wonderful, Louis. But wouldn't a rescue pilot wear proper clothes to stay warm during missions?" Louis considered this for a moment, his head tilted to one side in the thoughtful way that always reminded Catherine of her husband at that age. "Maybe rescue pilots in hot places wear shorts," he concluded. "Like in the jungle where dinosaurs live." As the morning progressed, the temperature seemed to drop even further. The heating system at Adelaide Cottage was working overtime, but the old windows and high ceilings meant that maintaining warmth was always a challenge during the winter months. Louis's stubbornness was beginning to affect not just his own comfort but the comfort of everyone around him, as doors had to be kept closed and the heating turned up higher than usual. Catherine found herself torn between respecting her son's independence and ensuring his well-being. This was always the delicate balance she tried to maintain with all her children, allowing them to express themselves and make choices while keeping them safe and healthy. During their traditional Christmas morning walk preparation, the reality of Louis's clothing choice became undeniable. The other family members bundled up in thick coats, scarves, and warm boots, while Louis stood at the door in his dinosaur shorts, looking significantly less confident than he had earlier. "Perhaps," Catherine suggested gently, "we could compromise? You could wear your special shorts under some warm trousers?" Louis's lower lip began to tremble, not entirely from the cold. The weight of everyone's attention and his own growing discomfort was starting to overwhelm him. He wanted to stick to his decision, but he was beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, his choice hadn't been the most practical one. "I just wanted to be special today," he whispered to his mother, his earlier bravado completely gone. Catherine's heart melted as she knelt down to her son's level. This was the moment she had been waiting for, not to say "I told you so," but to help her little boy understand that being special didn't necessarily mean doing things differently from everyone else. "You are special, Louis. You're special because you're kind, and funny, and brave, and you make everyone around you smile. Your clothes don't make you special, you do." The young prince looked up at his mother with wide eyes, processing her words. Around them, the rest of the family waited patiently, understanding that this was one of those small but important moments in a child's development. Outside, the first snow of Christmas Day began to fall, adding an extra layer of magic to the morning but also emphasizing just how inappropriate shorts really were for the weather. Louis glanced toward the window, watching the snowflakes dance in the winter breeze, and, for the first time that morning, he seemed to truly understand what everyone had been trying to tell him. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of his grandparents, King Charles and Queen Camilla, who had come to join the family for their Christmas celebrations. As they entered the warm hallway, removing their heavy winter coats, scarves, and gloves, Louis suddenly felt very small and very cold standing there in his summer shorts. "My goodness, Louis!" King Charles exclaimed, his eyes twinkling with amusement rather than criticism. "Are you planning to go for a swim in the Thames today?" Queen Camilla smiled warmly at her step-grandson. "What a brave young man you are, staying so cool on such a chilly day." Louis's cheeks flushed red, and not just from the cold. The gentle teasing from his grandparents, delivered with love and humor, helped him begin to see his situation from a different perspective. Sometimes, he realized, being stubborn wasn't the same as being brave. The Christmas morning continued to unfold with Louis still determinedly wearing his dinosaur shorts, though his resolve was beginning to waver as the cold reality of December weather set in. His grandfather, King Charles, had settled into his favorite armchair by the fireplace, occasionally glancing at his youngest grandson with a mixture of amusement and gentle concern. "You know, Louis," the king began, his voice carrying the wisdom of years and the warmth of a loving grandfather, "when I was about your age, I once insisted on wearing my naval uniform to a garden party in the middle of July. I was so proud of it, but I nearly fainted from the heat." Louis perked up at this story, momentarily forgetting about his cold legs. "Really, Grandpapa? Did people think you were silly?" "Well," King Charles chuckled, "I think they were more worried about me than anything else. Sometimes we make choices that seem right to us, but we learn from them. That's part of growing up." Queen Camilla, who had been observing the gentle exchange, added, "The important thing is that the people who love us want to help us, not because they think we're wrong, but because they care about us." Meanwhile, Catherine had been quietly preparing hot chocolate in the kitchen, her mind working on how to handle this delicate situation. She understood that this moment was about much more than just clothing choices. It was about Louis learning to balance his desire for independence with practical decision-making, and about the family learning how to support him through this process. Prince George approached his little brother, carrying a beautifully wrapped gift. "Louis, I have something special for you," he said, settling down on the floor beside the Christmas tree. But, you have to promise to open it carefully. Louis's eyes lit up with curiosity, his discomfort temporarily forgotten. He took the package with reverent hands, feeling its weight and trying to guess what might be inside. The wrapping paper was covered in dinosaurs, clearly chosen with his interests in mind. "Did you pick this paper because of my shorts?" Louis asked, looking up at his older brother with sudden understanding. George smiled. "I picked it because I know how much you love dinosaurs. But, maybe, after you open it, you'll understand something important." With careful fingers, Louis began to unwrap the gift. Inside was a beautiful book about dinosaurs, but not just any book. This one showed dinosaurs in different seasons and climates, with detailed illustrations of how they might have adapted to various weather conditions. "Look at this page," George said, pointing to an illustration of a large triceratops standing in what appeared to be a snowy landscape. Even dinosaurs knew how to dress for the weather. "See how this one has thick skin and fur-like covering to keep warm?" Louis studied the picture intently, his finger tracing the dinosaur's protective features. "He looks very cozy," he admitted. Charlotte joined her brothers on the floor, bringing her own contribution to the conversation. "Remember the nature documentary we watched last week? About how animals grow thicker coats in winter. Even my favorite teddy bear, Mr. Paddington, wears a coat," Louis said slowly, the pieces beginning to come together in his young mind. Princess Catherine appeared with a tray of steaming hot chocolate, complete with marshmallows and whipped cream. She set it down carefully on the coffee table and noticed how Louis instinctively moved closer to the warm mugs. "Mama," Louis said quietly, looking up at her with thoughtful eyes, "do you think the dinosaurs in the cold places ever wished they had warmer clothes?" Catherine sat down beside her youngest son, wrapping a soft throw blanket around both of them. "What do you think, sweetheart?" "I think maybe they did," Louis replied, snuggling closer to his mother's warmth. "I think maybe they looked at the warm places and wished they could go there, or maybe they wished they had better coats." Prince William, who had been watching this conversation unfold while setting up Louis's new toy helicopter, sat down on the floor with his family. "You know what I think is really special about today, Louis?" "What, Papa?" "I think it's special because you're learning something important. And learning is one of the bravest things anyone can do." Louis looked around at his family, all gathered close together, all warm and comfortable in their appropriate winter clothes. For the first time that morning, he really looked at what everyone else was wearing and noticed how content and cozy they appeared. "I think I might be a little bit cold," he admitted in a small voice. "That's okay, my love," Catherine said, pulling the blanket more snugly around him. "Being cold doesn't make you weak or wrong. It just means your body is telling you something important." Queen Camilla, who had been quietly observing this beautiful family moment, spoke up with gentle wisdom. "You know, Louis, some of the strongest people I know are the ones who can change their minds when they have new information. Like when you learn something new and it changes how you think about things?" Louis asked. "Exactly like that," she confirmed. The morning activities continued, but now there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Louis was beginning to participate more thoughtfully, asking questions about why people wore different clothes for different activities. When Maria suggested they might go outside to build a snowman later, Louis looked genuinely interested but also genuinely concerned. "How cold is it outside, Maria?" he asked. "Very cold, Master Louis. Cold enough that even the robins are fluffing up their feathers to stay warm." Louis considered this information seriously. "If I went outside like this, would I be able to help build the snowman properly?" "Well," Maria said diplomatically, "you might find it difficult to concentrate on building when you're shivering. And your fingers might get too cold to pack the snow properly," added George, who was beginning to understand his role as the supportive big brother in this learning moment. Charlotte chimed in, "Remember when we built the big snowman last year? We were outside for almost 2 hours. Even with all our warm clothes, we were still cold when we came in." Louis absorbed all this information, his practical young mind beginning to work through the problem. He loved building snowmen. He loved being outside with his family. He loved Christmas Day activities. But he also loved his dinosaur shorts and hadn't wanted to give up wearing them. Mama, he said finally, do you think there's a way I could wear my special shorts and still be warm enough to play outside? Catherine's heart swelled with pride at her son's thoughtful question. What do you think might work? Well, Louis said slowly, George suggested I could wear them under warm trousers. Would that work? That sounds like a very clever compromise, William said, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. And then, Louis continued, his excitement growing as he worked out the solution, I would still be wearing my special Christmas shorts, but I would also be warm enough to play and help and not worry about being cold. King Charles nodded approvingly from his chair. That sounds like the thinking of a future king, Louis. Finding solutions that work for everyone. The comment made Louis beam with pride, but also seemed to give him a new perspective on the morning's events. He looked around at his family again, seeing not just people who had been trying to tell him what to do, but people who had been trying to help him find a way to be both true to himself and practical at the same time. I think, he announced, standing up from under the cozy blanket, I would like to go upstairs and put on some warm trousers now. But I'm keeping my dinosaur shorts on underneath. That sounds like a perfect plan, Catherine said, standing up to accompany him. As they headed toward the stairs, Louis paused and turned back to his family. Thank you for being patient with me while I figured it out. The simple honesty of his statement brought tears to more than one pair of eyes in the room. This was the moment they had all been working toward, not forcing Louis to change his mind, but helping him come to his own understanding of the situation. Upstairs in his bedroom, Louis stood before his wardrobe with his mother beside him, both of them looking at the array of warm winter clothes hanging neatly in a row. The contrast between his current state in just the dinosaur shorts and the thick wool trousers, warm jumpers, and cozy socks before him was striking. You know what, Mama? Louis said thoughtfully, running his small fingers along the fabric of his warmest trousers. I think I was scared that if I changed my clothes, everyone would think I was giving up on being special. Catherine knelt down to meet her son's eye level, her heart full of understanding. What made you feel that way, sweetheart? Well, Louis began, settling cross-legged on his bedroom carpet. Yesterday when we were talking about Christmas morning, Charlotte said she was going to wear her new dress, and George said he was going to wear his special Christmas jumper. I wanted to have something special too, but all my nice clothes are just normal clothes. The truth behind his stubborn insistence was beginning to emerge, and Catherine realized this had been about much more than just clothing preference. So wearing your dinosaur shorts was your way of making Christmas morning special? Yes, Louis nodded earnestly. I thought if I wore something different and fun, then I would be special too, like Charlotte and George. Catherine's eyes grew soft with understanding. Oh, my darling boy. You don't need special clothes to be special. You're special because of who you are. But everyone else had special Christmas things planned, Louis protested, though his voice was gentler now than it had been earlier. I just wanted to be part of that. You are part of it, Louis. You're the most important part of it, because you're you. As they talked, Louis began to pull on his warm trousers over his dinosaur shorts, carefully adjusting them so that the bright blue fabric was completely hidden but still there, still making him feel special in his own way. There, he said with satisfaction, looking at himself in the mirror. Now I'm ready for Christmas Day activities. When they returned downstairs, the transformation in Louis was immediately apparent to everyone. He moved with more confidence, no longer distracted by the cold, and his natural enthusiasm was able to shine through without the underlying discomfort that had been affecting him all morning. Look, Grandpapa, he announced, running up to King Charles. I'm still wearing my dinosaur shorts, but now I'm warm enough to help build the snowman. What a brilliant solution, the king replied, genuinely impressed by his grandson's problem-solving skills. You've managed to have both things you wanted. The family began preparing for their traditional Christmas Day walk and snowman building activity. As they gathered their coats, scarves, and gloves, Louis participated enthusiastically, no longer feeling left out or different from the rest of his family. Can I help carry the carrot for the snowman's nose? He asked, bouncing on his toes with excitement. Of course, said Charlotte, handing him the orange carrot they had prepared. But you have to promise not to eat it on the way. I promise, Louis giggled. Though it does look quite tasty. Outside, the December air was crisp and cold, with fresh snow continuing to fall in gentle flakes that caught in everyone's hair and on their warm coats. Louis, now properly dressed, was able to fully enjoy the winter wonderland around Adelaide Cottage without any distraction from discomfort. "This is perfect snowman snow," announced George, scooping up a handful and demonstrating how well it packed together. "Not too wet, not too dry." The family worked together to roll large snowballs, with even the youngest member able to participate fully now that he was dressed appropriately for the weather. Louis threw himself into the activity with characteristic enthusiasm, his cheeks rosy from the cold air and exercise rather than from shivering. "Mama, look how big we can make the bottom ball," he called out, pushing his section of snow with all his might. Prince William helped guide the large snowball into position while Catherine gathered sticks for the arms. Queen Camilla had brought a colorful scarf from the house, and King Charles was arranging the stones they had collected for the snowman's buttons. "Where should the carrot go?" Louis asked, holding up the orange vegetable with ceremony. "Right in the center of his face," Charlotte directed, helping her little brother reach up to the snowman's head height. As Louis carefully inserted the carrot nose, he stepped back to admire their work with obvious pride. "He looks wonderful," he declared. "And I helped make him." "You certainly did," agreed his father. "In fact, I think you might have been our most enthusiastic snowman builder today." The comment made Louis beam with happiness, and Catherine realized that this was what her son had been seeking all along, not attention for doing something different or unusual, but recognition for his contributions and participation in family activities. As they put the finishing touches on their snowman, adding the scarf and arranging the stick arms just right, Louis made an observation that surprised everyone. "You know what," he said, stepping back to look at their creation. "If our snowman was wearing shorts like I was this morning, he would melt much faster because he'd be too cold to stay frozen properly." The adults exchanged glances over his head, impressed by how he had connected his morning experience to this new situation. "That's a very smart observation," said King Charles. "What made you think of that?" "Well," Louis explained, "when I was cold this morning, I felt like I might melt like ice cream if I got any colder. So our snowman needs his warm scarf to stay solid and not melt away." George nodded seriously. "That makes perfect sense. Everything needs the right protection for its environment. Like how fish need water and birds need air," added Charlotte, following her brother's line of thinking. "And how dinosaurs needed the right kind of covering for their climate," Louis concluded, referencing the book George had given him earlier. As they headed back toward the house, rosy-cheeked and happy from their outdoor adventure, Louis skipped alongside his family with obvious contentment. The crisis of the morning seemed far behind them now, replaced by the successful resolution and the joy of shared family time. "Mama," he said, taking Catherine's gloved hand in his own small mittened one, "I'm really glad I changed into warm clothes. I had much more fun building the snowman when I wasn't thinking about being cold all the time." "I'm glad too, sweetheart. It's wonderful to see you enjoying yourself so much." Back inside the warm house, as they all removed their wet boots and hung up their coats, Louis made another announcement. "Tomorrow, if it's still cold, I think I'll wear my warm clothes right from the start. But maybe I can still wear my dinosaur shorts underneath sometimes, just because they make me happy." "That sounds like a perfect plan," agreed his father, helping him out of his snow-covered coat. The afternoon stretched ahead of them, filled with Christmas dinner preparations, more gift exchanges, and family games. Louis participated in everything with renewed enthusiasm, no longer distracted by discomfort or the need to prove his independence through impractical choices. During Christmas dinner, as the family gathered around the elegantly set table, Louis was able to focus completely on the delicious food, the warm conversation, and the joy of being surrounded by people who loved him. His earlier struggle with the clothing choice had transformed into a valuable learning experience that had actually brought the family closer together. "This has been the best Christmas morning," he declared, taking a bite of his grandmother's famous Christmas pudding. "Even though it started with you being cold?" teased Charlotte gently. "Especially because it started that way," Louis replied with surprising wisdom for a 6-year-old. "Because I learned something important, and everyone helped me figure it out without making me feel bad about it." As Christmas Day evening approached, the Wales family gathered in their cozy living room, the fireplace crackling warmly as outside the winter darkness settled over Windsor. Louis, now comfortable in his warm clothes with his special dinosaur shorts hidden safely underneath, was curled up on the sofa between his parents, a picture book about Arctic animals open on his lap. "Mama," he said thoughtfully, looking up from a page showing polar bears in their thick white coats, "I've been thinking about this morning." Catherine put down her cup of tea and gave her youngest son her full attention. "What have you been thinking about, sweetheart?" "I was thinking about how sometimes we want something so much that we don't listen to the people who are trying to help us," Louis said, his young voice carrying a maturity that hadn't been there that morning. "Like how I wanted to be special so much that I didn't listen when everyone was trying to tell me I might be cold." Prince William looked up from the Christmas card he was reading, his heart swelling with pride at his son's insight. "That's a very grown-up observation, Louis." "But I also learned something else," Louis continued, closing the book and sitting up straighter. "I learned that the people who love me weren't trying to stop me from being special. They were trying to help me be special in a way that wouldn't hurt me." King Charles, who had been dozing gently in his armchair, opened his eyes and smiled at his grandson. "What do you mean by that, Louis?" "Well," Louis explained, settling back against his mother's side, "when I wore just my shorts this morning, I spent all my time thinking about being cold instead of thinking about Christmas and family and snowmen and presents. So I wasn't really able to be my best self." Queen Camilla set down her knitting and looked at Louis with admiration. "That's incredibly wise, my dear boy. You've learned something that many adults still struggle with." Charlotte and George, who had been playing a quiet board game by the fireplace, paused their activities to listen to their little brother's reflections. "What I really learned," Louis continued, "is that being special isn't about doing something different just to be different. It's about being the best version of yourself that you can be." "And how do you think you can be the best version of yourself?" asked Catherine gently. Louis thought for a moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. "By listening to my body when it tells me important things, like when it's cold. By listening to people who love me when they're trying to help. And by remembering that I'm already special just because I'm me, not because of what I wear or what I do differently from everyone else." The room fell into a comfortable silence as everyone absorbed the wisdom of the 6-year-old's words. It had been a day of learning for everyone, not just Louis. "You know what else I learned?" Louis added, his characteristic enthusiasm returning. "I learned that sometimes the best solutions are the ones where everyone gets what they need. Like how I got to wear my special shorts and also be warm enough to enjoy Christmas Day." "That's called a compromise," said George, always ready to help his little brother expand his vocabulary. "Compromise," Louis repeated carefully. "I like that word. It sounds like something a grown-up would do." "It is something grown-ups do all the time," confirmed his father. "In fact, it's one of the most important skills anyone can learn, whether they're 6 years old or 60 years old." As the evening continued, the family shared more stories and memories from the day. Louis listened intently as his grandparents told tales of their own childhood Christmas experiences, including times when they had made choices they later regretted and learned from those experiences. "When I was about your age," Queen Camilla shared, "I once insisted on wearing my best party shoes to go fossil hunting on the beach. Within an hour, my beautiful shoes were ruined, and my feet were covered in blisters. I spent the rest of the day watching everyone else have fun while I sat on a rock feeling sorry for myself." "Did anyone try to tell you not to wear the party shoes?" Louis asked, fascinated by this story of another child making an impractical choice. "Oh yes," Camilla laughed. "My mother suggested Wellington boots at least 3 times. But I was so determined to look fancy that I didn't listen to her practical advice." "Just like I didn't listen about warm clothes this morning," Louis said, understanding the parallel immediately. "Exactly. And, just like you, I learned that sometimes practical choices are the ones that actually let us enjoy life more fully." As bedtime approached, Louis went through his evening routine with a contentment that had been missing that morning. He brushed his teeth without argument, chose his warmest pajamas without prompting, and climbed into bed with a sense of satisfaction about the day's events. "Mama," he said as Catherine tucked him in, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, darling. Do you think I'll remember this lesson when I'm older? About listening to people who love me and making practical choices?" Catherine smoothed his hair back from his forehead and smiled. I think today was so important that you'll carry this lesson with you for a very long time. And, if you ever forget, we'll be here to gently remind you. And, I can always remember by thinking about the cold morning and the warm snowman afternoon, Lewis said drowsily. That's right. You can remember that the best adventures happen when we're comfortable enough to fully enjoy them. As Catherine turned off the bedside lamp, Lewis made one final observation in the darkened room. Mama? I think tomorrow I'm going to wear my warmest clothes right from the start. But, maybe, if it's okay, I could still wear my dinosaur shorts underneath sometimes. Not because I have to be different, but just because they make me smile. I think that would be perfect, sweetheart. Sweet dreams. Outside his window, the snow continued to fall gently, covering the world in a peaceful white blanket. Inside, a 6-year-old prince drifted off to sleep, secure in the knowledge that he was loved, supported, and understood by his family, and confident in his new understanding of himself and the world around him. The next morning would bring new adventures and new choices, but Lewis would face them with the wisdom gained from his Christmas Day experience. He had learned that being special wasn't about standing out through impractical choices, but about being true to himself while also being considerate of practical realities and the advice of people who cared about him. In the months that followed, the story of Prince Lewis's dinosaur shorts on Christmas Day would become a beloved family tale, told and retold with affection and humor. But, more than just an amusing anecdote, it would serve as a reminder to all of them about the importance of patience, understanding, and allowing children to learn from their own experiences while providing gentle guidance and unconditional love. Lewis himself would remember that cold Christmas morning and the warm afternoon that followed as one of his most important learning experiences. It would influence how he approached challenges throughout his childhood and beyond, teaching him that wisdom often comes not from avoiding mistakes, but from learning how to navigate through them with grace, humility, and the support of those who love us most. And, somewhere in his dresser drawer, carefully folded and treasured, the dinosaur shorts would remain a symbol not of stubbornness overcome, but of a young boy's journey toward understanding himself and his place in the world, supported every step of the way by a family who knew that love sometimes means letting someone learn their own lessons, while always being ready to help them find their way home.